Imagine someone you've underestimated for years, the quiet, gentle, empathetic person you thought would never fight back, suddenly turning every ounce of their emotional intelligence into a weapon against you. Terrifying, isn't it? That's the reality when an empath reaches their breaking point. When they snap, it's not about drama or chaos, it's about precision. And make no mistake, they're far more dangerous than any narcissist could ever be. If you've ever felt powerless around someone manipulative, pause right now. Imagine flipping that dynamic, not with anger, but with insight, strategy, and unshakable boundaries. Hit that like button if you want to learn exactly how empaths reclaim control. Boundaries are the first and most powerful weapon in a fed-up empath's arsenal. For years, they may have tolerated manipulation, walking on eggshells to preserve peace, often at the cost of their own well-being. But once that threshold is crossed, the empath doesn't flail. They enforce limits with unflinching clarity. Unlike a narcissist, whose boundaries are self-serving and flexible only when convenient, an empath's boundaries are anchored in integrity and necessity. They communicate consequences calmly but firmly, leaving no room for negotiation or guilt tripping. This sudden clarity can be shocking to the narcissist, who relies on bending others to their will. Every previously exploited vulnerability becomes irrelevant, because the empath is no longer accessible in the ways that once made control possible. Moreover, the empath's boundaries aren't reactive, they're proactive. They anticipate where manipulation will occur and shut it down before damage can be done. It's this preemptive strategy that makes them so formidable. A narcissist expects chaos, but what they encounter is precise, unwavering protection of the self. By drawing clear lines and standing firmly behind them, the empath disrupts the familiar power dynamic. The once predictable narcissist finds themselves disarmed, exposed, and most importantly, powerless to provoke or manipulate the empath as they once did. When a fed-up empath decides they've had enough, their moral compass becomes a source of power rather than a vulnerability. Narcissists often operate in a world where ethics are flexible, where rules bend to self-interest and accountability is optional. Empaths, on the other hand, are guided by a deep sense of fairness and justice, and when pushed beyond their limits, that moral fire becomes a strategic force. They don't lash out blindly or for the sake of drama. Instead, they use their ethical insight to expose manipulations, highlight hypocrisy, and create situations where the narcissist's own behavior is revealed without question. This gives them an unparalleled advantage because narcissists are skilled at projecting guilt and shame onto others, but they are ill-equipped to defend themselves when confronted by someone whose actions are grounded in unwavering principles. A fed-up empath can anticipate the moral weak points of the narcissist and apply pressure in ways that feel unstoppable yet measured. They hold the higher ground not just emotionally, but psychologically, because their actions align with the truth that the narcissist cannot manipulate or refute. Empaths possess a unique ability to read emotions and intentions with remarkable precision. And when they're fed up, this emotional accuracy becomes a tactical advantage. Unlike narcissists, who rely on charm, deception, and manipulation to control situations, a skilled empath can detect subtle cues, micro-expressions, tone shifts, body language that reveal hidden motives long before they are acted upon. This isn't intuition in a vague sense. It's a finely tuned radar for human behavior developed over years of deep emotional attunement. When a narcissist tries to gaslight, deflect, or subtly manipulate, the fed-up empath sees through it immediately, understanding both the immediate tactic and the underlying pattern. This allows them to respond strategically rather than emotionally, which is far more disarming than confrontation born of anger. The empath can preemptively set boundaries, redirect interactions, or even expose manipulative strategies without losing their composure, leaving the narcissist frustrated and off balance. It's a reversal of the usual power dynamic. The empath, once perceived as overly sensitive or passive, now becomes the one orchestrating the interaction, armed with insight the narcissist cannot easily counter. In this way, emotional intelligence becomes not just a protective mechanism, but a weapon of precision. The empath's capacity to understand, anticipate, and navigate human behavior transforms their sensitivity from vulnerability into dominance, proving that knowledge of the heart can be just as powerful, if not more, than sheer force or coercion. This skill turns the tables, making the once dominant narcissist suddenly vulnerable to the very dynamics they once controlled. A fed-up empath doesn't forget. Every slight, every manipulation, every betrayal is stored in memory, not as obsessive rumination, but as a detailed map of patterns, vulnerabilities, and tactics. Narcissists often operate under the assumption that others will forgive, forget, or be too distracted to track their behavior over time. Empaths, however, remember. They observe, catalog, and learn from repeated interactions, building an internal database of exactly how the narcissist operates, their triggers, their lies, their methods of control. When the empath reaches a breaking point, they draw upon this long-term memory with precision. This isn't about grudges, it's about strategic awareness. Each past encounter informs their response, allowing them to anticipate manipulations before they occur and neutralize them before harm can be done. In practice, this means the narcissist's familiar tactics, gaslighting, blame shifting, silent treatment, are no longer effective. The empath sees them coming, predicts the outcomes, and responds in ways that are both calculated and effective. Moreover, this memory empowers the empath to communicate clearly, referencing facts and patterns that the narcissist cannot easily dispute or spin. The advantage here is psychological dominance. The narcissist, used to exploiting gaps in awareness and emotional blindness, suddenly finds their usual arsenal useless. The empath transforms history into a weapon, using knowledge of past harms not to escalate conflict unnecessarily, but to ensure that control has shifted. In essence, the fed-up empath's memory is not a liability, but a precise tool for empowerment, turning the narcissist's reliance on manipulation against them in ways they cannot anticipate or counter. Once an empath has reached their limit, their emotional energy becomes focused and purposeful rather than scattered or reactive. Narcissists often rely on creating chaos, confusion, or emotional turmoil to maintain control, believing that constant unpredictability keeps others off balance. A fed-up empath, however, channels their emotional intensity with precision. They don't lash out indiscriminately. Every word, action, and boundary is deliberate, aimed at neutralizing manipulation or reclaiming autonomy. This focused energy transforms what might once have been vulnerability, sensitivity to others' emotions, into strategic strength. They can calmly confront deception, redirect interactions, or disengage entirely while maintaining composure and clarity. Unlike a narcissist whose energy is consumed by ego-driven schemes and self-promotion, the empath's energy is goal-oriented and adaptive, flowing toward resolution and protection rather than self-interest. This makes their response far more impactful. The narcissist, accustomed to unpredictability and surface-level theatrics, finds themselves unable to anticipate or control the empath's actions. The empath's focus magnifies their influence, allowing them to dismantle manipulative structures and regain psychological dominance without resorting to aggression. It's a quiet but potent power, a calculated application of emotional intelligence that the narcissist cannot mimic or counter. In effect, the empath turns their once exploitable sensitivity into a concentrated force, creating outcomes that are precise, effective, and transformative. By focusing energy on strategy rather than reaction, the fed-up empath becomes not only resilient but extraordinarily formidable. When a fed-up empath decides to act, they rarely do it alone. Over time, they have developed an acute awareness of social dynamics and human behavior, which allows them to identify allies, supporters, or those who can provide objective perspectives. Narcissists thrive in isolation, manipulating individuals one by one, relying on secrecy, division, and control. The empath, by contrast, leverages relationships and networks to create accountability and transparency. This doesn't mean they are gossipy or vindictive. It means they strategically ensure that patterns of manipulation are recognized and addressed. Allies can serve as witnesses, sources of support, or even catalysts for exposing the narcissist's behavior. This social influence amplifies the empath's effectiveness, transforming what was once personal frustration into a collective, systemic response that the narcissist cannot easily contain. By recruiting or aligning with others, the empath shifts the power dynamic. Control is no longer centralized with the narcissist, and their usual tactics of intimidation or deception lose potency. The empath's capacity to build and utilize alliances demonstrates that their power is not just emotional or internal, it is relational. They understand that influence is magnified when others recognize the truth of the situation, and they apply this insight to protect themselves and assert boundaries. In essence, the narcissist's isolation becomes their weakness, while the empath's ability to engage, inspire, and align others becomes an additional layer of strategic defense. This combination of insight, ethics, and social leverage makes the fed-up empath unexpectedly formidable, transforming personal empowerment into a force that extends beyond themselves. Fed-up empaths possess an almost uncanny ability to anticipate manipulative behavior before it even unfolds. Years of emotional attunement, observation, and pattern recognition allow them to detect subtle cues, tiny inconsistencies in words, fleeting micro-expressions, or shifts in energy that reveal underlying intentions. Narcissists, accustomed to controlling the narrative through deception and surprise, often assume their tactics will remain effective because others are unaware or reactive. The empath, however, has developed predictive awareness. They can foresee the likely trajectory of manipulative attempts and prepare accordingly. This foresight allows them to preemptively neutralize strategies of control, deflect gaslighting attempts, and maintain psychological stability in situations designed to provoke chaos. By anticipating moves before they occur, the empath flips the dynamic, turning themselves from passive target into active orchestrator of interactions. This ability is particularly disarming for narcissists, who rely on unpredictability and emotional exploitation to maintain dominance. When their moves are anticipated, exposed, or countered with precision, the narcissist experiences frustration and disorientation. They can no longer operate in familiar, controlling ways. The empath's predictive awareness, therefore, is not reactive. It is proactive and tactical. It transforms their sensitivity into strategic insight, allowing them to navigate complex interpersonal dynamics with authority. In short, while narcissists try to manipulate outcomes to their favor, the fed-up empath anticipates, adjusts, and neutralizes those outcomes, rendering the narcissist's power ineffective and leaving them vulnerable in ways they rarely expect or understand. When a fed-up empath reaches the point of ultimate detachment, their response is not just defensive, it is transformative. Unlike narcissists, who cling to control and obsess over dominance, empaths have the capacity to remove themselves entirely from toxic situations, cutting off the very supply that fuels manipulation. This isn't impulsive abandonment. It is a deliberate, strategic disengagement that leaves the narcissist powerless. By detaching, the empath reclaims autonomy, protects their emotional well-being, and forces the narcissist to confront a reality where influence is no longer possible. What makes this so dangerous to a narcissist is that it undermines the entire system they rely on. Attention, compliance, and control vanish, and with them, the narcissist's sense of superiority and certainty. Detachment also carries an implicit lesson. Boundaries are not negotiable, and emotional exploitation has consequences. The empath transforms what might have been perceived as vulnerability, their empathy, into a form of empowerment that cannot be resisted, bargained with, or manipulated. This final act of removing themselves is both a shield and a sword. It prevents further harm while demonstrating that manipulation is ineffective against someone who values self-preservation and integrity above all else. In doing so, the fed-up empath achieves a rare psychological victory. The narcissist, accustomed to being the orchestrator of outcomes, finds themselves disarmed, isolated, and irrelevant. It is the ultimate power shift, one that cannot be reversed, showing that true strength often lies not in domination, but in the wisdom and courage to walk away unscathed. At the end of the day, the fed-up empath demonstrates a power that is both subtle and undeniable. Unlike a narcissist, whose influence relies on manipulation, control, and fear, the empath's strength comes from clarity, insight, and unwavering self-respect. They have endured years of emotional exploitation, and in that endurance, they have cultivated a precision of perception and a depth of understanding that the narcissist can never replicate. Every boundary they enforce, every action they take, and every detachment they execute is informed by experience, moral insight, and strategic foresight. They act not from impulsive rage, but from intentional empowerment, anticipating manipulation, neutralizing chaos, and reclaiming control with focused energy. They engage alliances, leverage emotional intelligence, and utilize ethical authority to dismantle the narcissist's familiar structures, leaving them exposed and powerless. Ultimately, what makes the fed-up empath more dangerous than the narcissist is that they cannot be provoked, deceived, or controlled once they have chosen to protect themselves. They transform what once may have been seen as vulnerability, sensitivity, empathy, and compassion into weapons of resilience, foresight, and influence. The narcissist, used to dominating others, faces an adversary who is psychologically prepared, strategically aware, and emotionally sovereign. In walking away, setting boundaries, or confronting deception, the empath shifts the power dynamic entirely, proving that true strength is not about intimidation or coercion. It is about knowing your worth, understanding human behavior, and refusing to be manipulated. In the end, the fed-up empath does not seek to destroy, but simply to exist free, leaving the narcissist exposed to the consequences of their own toxicity.